I'm a search and rescue operator. Last month, I responded to a distress signal originating from an uninhabited island. I discovered a journal whose contents are disturbing. Last month, my team responded to a SOS in the Southern Pacific. When we arrived, we were unable to locate any of the stricken individuals, or indeed, any evidence of their whereabouts. All I found was 2 curious items in a local cave system, a journal and an audio recorder, both of which were owned by a man named Albert Vess, an archaeologist, and one of the individuals who deployed the SOS. The contents of the journal are disturbing, but perhaps worse still is the audio recording. Since reading the journal and listening to the audio, I've been feeling strange, unwell. My mind feels like mush, and my moods have been erratic. No medication has helped. My doctor thinks I just need some rest, but I'm not sure. It's just hard to describe. I don't know why, but I feel like the island has something to do with it. I feel like the journal does. I've transcribed it below in case anybody can help me better understand it, but be warned, it's an uncomfortable read. June 1st, 2021. The valley is steep. For an island in the middle of the Pacific, it feels almost unnatural, certainly uncommon. I've done plenty of these expeditions, and I've rarely encountered geography such as this. The shoreline is sparse, thin. It gives way to a scatter of trees and a sharp drop-off into a hollow of palms and brush. It's incredible, claustrophobic. It's where we're going, all 4 of us. Bernard, the research lead, Darian, the cave explorer, and Allison, one of the most accomplished archaeologists I've ever met. And of course, myself. My stomach is still upside down, recovering from the sail it took to get here, but the worst is over. Once we finish our survey of the ruin below, we can set up camp and get some shut-eye. It's not so bad, really, and we're so very close. This, I think, could be the discovery of a lifetime. The sun is setting in the sky. When we looked down into the valley this afternoon, we never anticipated it'd be this slow going, or that the canopy of leaves would be this blinding. Allison recommends we make camp and get some rest. She says the ruins will be there to excavate in the morning, and we'll be better off with more daylight to spare. Bernard disagrees. He says we've got lanterns and rations, and that the scene survey won't take that long. Besides, he's not planning on doing any excavating until he knows the ruins are actually there. His remark catches us off guard. I remind him that there are already aerial photos of the site, that there's no need to prove it's actually there because we can see that it is. It takes Bernard a minute to answer, and when he does, he admits the aerial photos of the ruins were doctored. He admits that the research he submitted to secure this grant was false. The liar. All I have, he says, is what's written in here. He shows us a leather-bound book with yellowed pages. It belonged to his ancestor, apparently, a merchant captain who was shipwrecked on this island over a century ago. According to the journal, there really are ruins, but the thing is, they're underground. You'd never know they were there if you weren't looking for them, and it's why nobody's discovered them before. I can hardly believe it. I want to be furious at him, but Allison is angry enough for the both of us. She's fuming. Darian doesn't seem to mind terribly, maybe because it's her first expedition, and she still has stars in her eyes. Trust me, Bernard says. This will be the discovery of our lives. I suppose we don't really have a choice. The boat that dropped us off won't be returning for another week. For better or worse, I and everybody else are stuck on this little spit of land. Allison heads into the trees to pee, and when she comes back, she's a nervous wreck. Her shoulders are quaking. Her voice is uneven. I heard footsteps out there, she says. Footsteps and laughter, out there in the jungle. I remind her that there's nobody out there, that this island is as empty as it's ever been. Then who's laughing at me? She snaps. The trees? The jungle ends in moonlight. It opens to a clearing, a dusty expanse of stone boulders and saplings. We made it to the bottom of the valley, to the site of the supposed underground ruins. Bernard tells us there should be an opening somewhere, a hole. It might be tiny, or it might be large enough to fall into if you aren't careful. The 4 of us split off, flashlights in tow. Allison in one direction, scowling, and Darian in another, beaming. She's young enough that I hope we really do find something. Otherwise, this might just sour her opinion on archaeology for good. Before I can step off, Bernard stops me. He asks me if I can hear that. Hear what? I ask. The laughter, he says. It's not 40 paces away that something catches my eye. It's small, difficult to make out in the dark, even with the light of my lantern and the moon above, but it's there. It's making my skin crawl. Between two squat boulders is a circle of small stones arranged in a spiral. They frame a recess into the earth that's filled with decaying wood, charred black by the heat of flames, a fire pit. I gaze at it, stunned. This island should be deserted. As my mind churns, I spot something sticking out of the dirt and the ash. It's broken, crumbling. It looks like Mother Nature has had its way with it, but it's unnatural enough to stick out to me. It isn't wood. It isn't stone. It's strange. I bend low, digging into the mess, hoping the debris above has managed to preserve what lay beneath. A moment later, and I know that it has. My hands pull something free, something that's decomposed into 3 pieces, something familiar, a fractured human skull. It's odd, but I stare at the skull for a long while. There's something about it that I can't quite put my finger on, but it's fascinating to me. I feel almost entranced by it. Before I can properly process my find, I hear screaming, shouting. I hear Bernard, Allison, and Darian all calling my name. They're shrieking for me into the night, telling me the good news. They've found the ruin. When I reach them, they surround a hole in the earth the size of a basketball. Bernard's lantern is sitting next to it. He's explaining in an excited tone how he nearly fell into the damn thing. He's explaining how he knew it would be here, about how he never once had any doubt. I'm trying to tell them, about the fire pit. I'm trying to tell them about the human skull split into 3 pieces. What does it matter? Darian asks. If somebody died here, that was probably 100 years ago. She's already getting herself ready for her first big find. She's tying a length of rope to a nearby boulder to serve as an anchor point. Bernard's strapping a headlamp to her helmet. Why it matters, I say, is that human skulls don't generally burn themselves on deserted islands. Why it matters is that whoever burned that skull was doing it very much on purpose, and there are very few reasons that would ever be okay. Bernard sides with Darian, but tells me that I'm probably right, that whoever burned that skull was up to no good. He tells me we can't do anything about it since it's ancient history. Before I can argue my point, Allison calls us over. She's on her belly at the entrance of the hole, with her flashlight angled down trying to get a look inside the ruin. She tells us she thinks she saw something move down there. Darian reasons that it's probably just water bouncing the light around, making shadows. She says she sees it all the time while exploring underground caves. I figure she's probably right about that. In a valley like this, it'll be a small miracle if these ruins aren't already flooded. Still, the skull looms in the back of my mind. It unnerves me. Darian rigs the rope to her carabiner and slips her legs into the hole. A moment later, and she shimmies the rest of her body through the opening until the white of her helmet disappears beneath the earth. As she lowers herself down into the ruins, Bernard asks her for details about what she's seeing. For the first while, she says it's just a long, tight drop. Nothing to see, just stone pressing against her on all sides. Then she says it's opening up into a cavern. She says she's inside of them now, the ruins, or rather, a cave system. I don't see any ruins, she tells us. All I see are... Her voice trails off. It sounds concerned. There's writing down here, she says. Lots of writing, all over the cave walls. It looks like it was scratched into the stone. Bernard looks ecstatic. He asks her what language it's in and whether or not she can read it. She responds by saying that yes, she can read it. It's English numerals, she says. There are numbers all over the cave. A pause, 2 breaths. Her voice echoes out of the dark hole. Are these dates? Nobody gets a chance to ask her about the dates or exactly how many there are because our attention is stolen. In the distance, from deep within the jungle, we hear the low sound of footsteps, heavy, desperate footsteps, footsteps that are coming our way. I call into the hole, ordering Darian to get out. I tell her something. Somebody is coming. My heart is beating through my chest, my mind replaying images of the scorched skull. It feels insane, absurd. There's nobody on this island. We know that. We have the records, and yet, I feel that something is very wrong. Allison holds her only weapon, a brush-whacking machete, and she's shrieking at Bernard, demanding whether he forgot to mention the existence of cannibal tribes on the island. Bernard's too shell-shocked to speak. I holler at him to help me heave on the rope, to bring Darian up faster. Thankfully, he does. It's exhausting, but we manage to pull her up to the top of the hole, just far enough to see the white of her helmet and her terrified features. She tells us that she's stuck, that she can't move any further. I hear the footfalls nearing, so close. Whatever's coming is running now, and the sound is like thunder in my ears. I watch as Bernard works at freeing Darian from the opening, and I realize it's taking too long. much too long. I drop the line and rush over to help, pressing my hands against Darian's shoulders. Then, all at once, the footfalls stop. They stop just outside the perimeter of the clearing. For a moment, the night is silent. None of us so much as steal a breath as we listen for whatever is out there, whatever is coming for us. Allison suggests that our shouting may have scared it off. It's a comforting thought, that it might have been a large species of boar charging through the jungle, or perhaps an earthquake. Bernard agrees. He adds that we're all running low on sleep and very on edge, and that Allison was right. We should have just made camp and gotten some rest. Then Darian screams, and her body slips, ribs snapping as she disappears back into the darkness of the room. A split second later, there's a grotesque cracking sound and the screaming stops. It's the sound of Darian's body striking the cavern floor. It is, I think, the sound of Darian dying. Something goes through us then. Allison, Bernard, myself. Something goes through us like a bullet, shutting us up as we wait, desperate to hear Darian call out and say she's okay, that she's just a little bruised up. I call out to her, desperate, horrified. Allison appears at my side and hushes me with a finger. She glares at me, narrowing her eyes at me like all of this entire disaster is somehow my fault. Then she lowers herself onto her hands and knees, machete by her side, ear toward the hole. She asks us if we can hear that. She tells us to listen. Bernard and I press ourselves closer to the opening. We strain our ears. There's a scraping sound coming from inside, a low, sustained sound, like something being slid across stone. "There's something down there," Allison says. "I knew there was something down there, and I told you, Bernard. I f***ing warned you." She erupts, lunging at Bernard like a maelstrom, scratching, punching, hurting him as much as she can. He curls up, but he doesn't try to fight back. He doesn't try to flee. He sits there trembling, I think, because he hears the same thing that Allison and I do, down there in the cavern. He hears the sound of Darian's body being dragged away. We put it to a vote. Out of the three of us, only Bernard wants to go back down into the hole looking for Darian. Only Bernard wants to face the nightmare he dragged us into. Allison and I, we have no idea what we're dealing with. Bernard's convinced that it's an animal. A family of bears, perhaps, that are using the cavern as a sort of den. There's no other alternative, he says. What I don't say is that there's always an alternative. In this case, the alternative is we're not alone on this island. In this case, the alternative is that whatever's out there doesn't want to be found. The hike back up to our base camp is long, and by the time we arrive, it's raining and half past noon. A wall of dark gray descends toward us from across the ocean. Storm clouds, lightning flashes on the horizon, followed by rolling cracks of thunder. The sea laps and churns. All any of us want to do is go to sleep, to rest, and process our grief over losing Darian. But we have work to do. Bernard fires up the HF amplifier and attempts to contact rescue services. Static greets him over the receiver. He tells us he doesn't think it's working. He tells us the radio is Allison tries her hand at it, and thank God she does, because she gets the thing running again. Over the other end, like the voice of an angel, we hear the operator crackle out of the speaker.
"Everything all right out there, folks?"
"No," we say in near-perfect unison. "God, no." The conversation doesn't go as planned. According to the operator, it could be hours or even days before we're picked up. The storm front in our area is a bad one, they explain, and it's likely to impede any rescue efforts. Local authorities aren't keen on risking their lives for tourists. At the moment, they're attempting to contact military vessels nearby for a potential extraction, but we shouldn't count on that. Their advice? Hunker down, batten the hatches, stay safe, avoid becoming separated. "What if there's somebody out there?" Allison asks them. "Trying to f***ing kill us?"
"Didn't you say you had a machete?"
they ask.
"Feel free to use it."
The night passes for me as a string of nightmares. I toss and turn for much of it. It's not clear why, but my stomach is in knots. I feel ill, nauseous, and unwell. I wonder if it's the rations I ate. Maybe Bernard didn't prepare them properly. Maybe they'd gone bad. It doesn't matter. My body and mind are exhausted enough that the pain in my stomach is an afterthought. I awake to silhouettes arguing, Allison and Bernard. My head feels like I just drank a bottle of whiskey and hit it with a hammer. My mouth is dry. I'm sweating and shivering at the same time. Do I have a fever? Pieces of their argument reach my ears. They're not far from me, but they sound so distant, so faint. "Give me a break, Allison. Darian's a grown woman who made her own choices. You think we knew she'd slip? She didn't slip. You know damn well." I stumble from the tent, and warm, tropical rain is pouring overhead. Wind whistles painfully in my ears. Allison and Bernard are standing beneath the awning nearby, looking at me, but their faces are a blur. I can't make out their expressions. "What are you doing up?" Allison asks. Eavesdropping? She's holding the machete, pointing it at me. Hands grab me by my arm, roughly. Go to sleep, Bernard orders. He guides me back into the tent, back into my sleeping bag. You're not well. Tomorrow the storm breaks and the rescue team should arrive. I mumble in response, but my words are slurred, barely there. It's okay, he says. Nothing about this is okay, I thought to myself. I spend the night in and out of sleep, my mind swimming. My body feels feverish, alternating between flashes of panting heat and frigid chills. My dreams are of Allison. In them, she's calling out to me, begging me for help. She's trapped inside a pit filled with snakes, covered head to toe in red and blue serpents. They're slithering about her, and I'm holding her machete and chopping at them, trying to save her. Please, she says, please. The next morning, my head is pounding. There's an awful pressure near my temples, like my brain is expanding outward and trying to split my skull in three. I need water. I need aspirin. Why is it so quiet? I open my eyes to an empty tent. Strangely, there's no sign of Allison or Bernard. It's just me and the remains of our HF radio. Red and blue wires lay strewn about the floor like electrical snakes. Its faceplate is split in two, the circuit board with it. What happened? Wandering outside, I find the storm has cleared. A sprinkle of rain is all that's left. Did the rescue team arrive already? Perhaps Allison and Bernard have taken them down to the ruins to search for Darian. I abandon the tent and take to the shoreline, calling out their names. It's a short while later that Bernard finds me, emerging from the jungle looking disheveled, manic. His eyes are wild, framed with heavy bags, and in his hand is Allison's machete. It's flecked in crimson. Can't find Allison. His voice is stuttering, moving too fast for his lips. She's gone. I tell him to slow down. My head is in rough shape, and it's difficult to follow what he's saying. Bernard, I ask, is there blood on that machete? He shakes his head. He tells me to go back to the tent, to lie down. He says he'll keep looking for her. He says she has to be around here somewhere. She has to. As he stalks off, I think I hear him mumble a prayer, but I'm so very tired. My dreams are once more of Allison, of Darian. This time, they're beckoning me to return to the ruin. They're weeping that Bernard has done this to us, that he's lost his mind. They're saying that he's trying to kill us off so that the discovery can be his, and his alone. He pushed me into the hole, Darian whimpers. He drowned me on the beach, Allison cries. He's drugging you, they say in unison. Don't trust him. Don't follow him. Go back to the ruins and you'll see the truth. Do it before he cuts you into little pieces and eats you, burns your skull and splits it in three. I open my eyes, and Bernard is fast asleep. The machete is tucked securely in his arms. As quietly as I can, I leave the tent and make for the ruins. It's partway through the jungle that the footsteps sound behind me. They're pounding the dirt, moving through the brush like a hurricane. Is it Bernard? I can't tell. My head is aching and my body is exhausted. But despite it all, I press forward at a sprint. I press forward toward the valley below, toward the ruins. I hear laughter in the jungle, manic, maddening, laughter. It's following me, closing in. Whatever is happening on this island, I realize begins and ends with those ruins. I must reach them. It's a small relief to see the rope still anchored to the stone. I quickly toss Darian's line into the entrance of the cavern and squeeze myself through the opening. My palms burn, splitting open in warm blood as they halt my descent. Before I can make it to the bottom, something snaps from above and my rope gives way. I fall a short and painful distance, with the rest of my rope tumbling down around me. Looking up, I expect to see Bernard standing at the small moonlit entrance. Instead, it's just the empty sky. Bernard? I shout. There's no response. Flicking on my headlamp, I take a look around the cavern. The light reveals a tight cave structure, one splitting off into 3 separate tunnels. Carved into the walls, just like Darian said, are numerals, dates. What's odd though, what's borderline impossible, is the date the numerals list. October 20th, 1972. It's my birthday. It's everywhere. I'm alone down here. There's no sign of Darian. There's no sign of Bernard. The cavern is empty and feels endless. I've made small attempts to scout the 3 tunnels, but each presents its own share of impassable obstacles, whether growing too tight to traverse, dropping off into abysmal black water, or twisting steeply upward. I've chosen instead to remain beneath the entrance to the ruins. It is my hope I can shout and gain the attention of the rescue team when they arrive. Until then, I take this time to update my journal. I filled the entries of my flight from the tent, of my return to the ruins. I filled in other details as best I can while their memory is still fresh in my mind, because even now I feel my stomach roll with hunger and my mouth thirsty for water. I feel myself slipping. These details may prove important to me at a later date. I just need to hang on and hope that somebody will come. But I'm so So thirsty. Perhaps just a sip from the lake, only a taste, just to wet my lips. I am unwell. I feel broken, aching all over. I'm aching in my mind, and it hurts. So much. It hurts. There are sounds around me, sounds in the cave. I've recorded them to study later, but it is so difficult to think, so difficult to write. Are they talking to me? The sounds are so close. Close. They're surrounding me from every corner of the cavern now, and memories are playing in my head like videos or movies. I don't feel good. I feel really bad. I see my hands pushing Darian into the hole, down into the ruins. Oh God, I see her eyes as she falls, looking at me. I'm sorry. Had to. The radio, it was just so loud, and the rescue team would come so fast that I had to call it off. I had to tell them we were just peachy, and that there was no need to rush because Darian showed up right as rain. Of course I needed to destroy the radio, snapped the faceplate on my knee. I had to. What if Allison called them back and told them I was fibbing? Allison, always with her machete. She never let the damn thing go. What the f*** was it? Her child? I needed to wait forever for her to step off into the jungle for a potty break, but when she did, I gutted her, cause she was gonna ruin it all. I swear, Scout's honor, she knew something was up with me. Bernard, oh Bernie, you knew the journal was trouble. You knew it was no good. You brought us anyway because you wanted answers for the dreams you were having since you read the thing. But don't worry. People are so easy to strangle when they're sleeping. Oh Lord, the voices, the skull, it told me it needed them. It needed us all down here, and we were so close to being part of this beautiful place, but nobody wanted to come, and Darian didn't land on her feet, so now it's just me. It's just me. Soon though, it'll be me and you. That's it. That's the final entry. Note that for Albert's less lucid entries, I attempted to transcribe them as accurately as I could from his writing. The bizarre capitalizations, the sudden misspellings, all of it is authentic to his journal, if that helps at all. Without access to the remains of any of the individuals, it's difficult to say if Albert was simply losing his mind or really did end their lives. The part about him canceling the SOS signal, however, is accurate. Somebody sent out a call indicating that Darian had reunited with the group and was not seriously injured, and that rescue at the time was no longer needed. We arrived 3 days later after their transportation returned to recover them and found their tent cut into pieces, equipment destroyed, and no sign of any members of the expedition. At that point, a search team scoured the island. I was the one who located the cave system, entered it, and recovered Albert Vess's journal and audio recorder, though there was no trace of him, body or otherwise. Here are the audio files I mentioned earlier. One is a sample of the laughter, and the other is a sample of the voice in the cave. In addition, I visually cited the writing on the cavern walls. The weird thing is that it doesn't match up to what was recorded in Mr. Vess's journal. The numerals I saw were all different. The date they listed was not October 20th, 1972, but instead April 4th, 1991, my birthday. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video. You can also check out some more of my animated horror stories right here.